Hello, football fans. Welcome back to week 8 of the 2023 season for the Scuffed Football Podcast. I'm losing track of weeks because some scheduling conflicts meant we didn't record last week, which would have been 7, so this is 8, even though it's only our 6th. It's all fucked. Anyway, we have 2 weeks of games to cover, but honestly, my notes didn't change much from last week into this week. I guess we'll see what the Monday night game does for next week since we are recording this a day early, but mostly all we have to talk about today is big picture stuff. So I kind of want to start by talking about 2 weeks ago. Both of our unbeatens went down. Philly lost to the Jets. San Francisco lost to Cleveland. Both very strange, very weird losses. And then we also saw some struggles over the last couple of days. Buffalo, they snuck by the Giants 2 weeks ago. They had a weird loss yesterday. Even watching, I still don't know how they managed to lose. It's all goofy. And then Kansas City struggled with Denver. So the big things that I really want to talk about here, Noah, are just playoff pictures and kind of what we're seeing as far as what we can reasonably expect playoffs or the late parts of the season to look like. For the AFC, I think the Chiefs still have to be considered front runners, even if they haven't looked as dominant. They're still beating the teams that they're supposed to beat.
I mean, yeah, I suppose. I think that we went into the season expecting the Chiefs to be better. Like the gap was supposed to be bigger, and I think we're seeing that it's a lot smaller. Yes, they're still beating the teams that they're supposed to, but I feel like that talent, I feel like the Dolphins have either taken a step up or more than likely, I think the Chiefs have taken a step down and just kind of leveled themselves with teams such as Buffalo when they're clicking. The Dolphins, I feel like they're all now, the gap is significantly closer.
Well, it's interesting to me to look at the schedule, too. You mentioned Miami, and I think that's a really good place to start because Miami still has a really good record. I mean, being 6-2 now, realistically, playoff chances are pretty good for them. I know we're only, halfway through here, or 5-2, whatever it is. The issue, I think, with the Dolphins is that they've very clearly shown that they are better than the bottom of the barrel teams, right? I mean, they beat up on the Panthers. They beat up on the Broncos. I think the issue is that against the better teams, it seems like they're struggling, and I'm not really sure the disconnect. They couldn't get it done against the Eagles, and they had some bad turnovers. They couldn't get it done against the Bills. Same kind of issues. I guess it's just how competitive do we think the Dolphins can be against, if we're still playing this as somebody has to dethrone the Chiefs eventually, right? If we haven't seen the Chiefs play anybody super good, but they're still winning games, and we're watching Miami struggle against good teams, how does a matchup between these two look?
I agree. I see the point. I feel like, once we see it, we'll know. But I feel like Miami is just not a team that's, I mean, take a look at the Bills too. They're really struggling, to be honest, when they shouldn't be. It's kind of just I don't really know. I think that we're going to get a really good game when they face up. I think the Dolphins still are in that same pedigree. I just think, again, they need to figure it out against the better teams.
And I think the Bills are interesting, too, because we've obviously watched them be dominant. I mean, they're scoring with, the best of the teams in the league. Their defense looks stout when they're healthy. I get that they've got some health concerns, but it seems like they can't take care of business against maybe some lesser teams. It's really interesting to see them honestly really take control over the Miami game, but then they're losing to the Patriots when Mac Jones has a slightly above average day. Who was their other loss this season? They lost to
we lost to Jets and Jags.
And the Jets too. I think that they make an interesting point, right? That the Jags have had down points in their year that, them beating Buffalo isn't necessarily super surprising, I guess. I mean, any given Sunday, but even the Jets are competing against better teams. We watched them beat the Eagles. We watched the Chiefs struggle against them and then beating the Bills. I don't even know what to make of the Jets at this point and how seriously we can consider Buffalo when those are their losses. It all just feels super interesting. Where does Buffalo fit into the mix?
Yeah, and I mean, even in the past 3 weeks, our one win against the Giants wasn't a convincing, resounding win that we all, at least both of us, thought it was going to be. And again, we went into this week, I think, both expecting Buffalo to dominate. And oh God, I can't believe we lost. But again, like I think we have 2 quality wins, but the other 4 games here have just not been convincing. Again, the 3 losses with like that one unconvincing win against a really struggling team. So I'm concerned too, but I'm holding out hope.
Well, I think the other player in the AFC that I don't think we can finish this without talking about is Baltimore. I think at the beginning of the season, I think we all considered Cincinnati one of those like top teams in the AFC, and we've really watched them struggle. Like, I don't know that they've got time to completely turn it around and convince us that they're as good as they were the past 2 years. But I think Baltimore has kind of stepped into that place in their division, and they're playing pretty good football. Lamar is obviously that dude. Like, he's worth every penny they pay him. He's that guy. But I guess for me, the issue with Baltimore is still like I haven't seen them beat those top teams. I haven't seen them play Miami or Buffalo or Kansas City. Like, I want to believe that what I've seen tells me that the Ravens are good, but I don't know how they fit into that mix either. Like, is this somebody that we realistically could potentially see in the Super Bowl with the parity that is the AFC?
I mean, I think any given week, the Ravens, again, have the ability and talent to. I think it's about finding out their consistency. Obviously, we see this explosive offense, every few weeks, and then we'll have an off week and, Lamar will throw for 3 picks and they won't get anything going. So I think for them, it's all about consistency. I mean, again, they still struggled against the Steelers and lost in a game that I think we both also expected them to win. So, I mean, and again, you're right. Like, we haven't seen a strength test for them against these higher teams yet. But yeah.
It's super interesting to me, though. Like, you mentioned the Steelers game, right? And I think that was a game that we definitely expected them to win. But they also beat the Browns really handedly. That game was 28-3, right? And we've also watched, like, the Browns defense, like, actually keep their team in games. Like, knowing what we know now, the Ravens winning that game confidently feels like a really big deal. Even this past week, we all considered the Lions pretty good. They're division favorites, and we're talking about them for like how deep of a run they could make with the Eagles and the 49ers. And the Ravens win this game 38-6. Like, it just feels like the Ravens are the only ones that can confidently go in and be the better team. Sure, they've got their weird losses to the Bucs and to the Steelers, but like, I guess the Bucs was still preseason, wasn't it? Yeah, they were talking about it on whatever. But even still, like, they just feel like they can actually walk in and have good games when you expect them to have good games. They're the ones that I could, like, if I'm putting money behind somebody, right, I feel way more confident gambling on a 5-point spread for the Ravens than I do the Chiefs at 6.5 at this point. Like, I recognize that they get put on different thresholds, but it's really hard for me to count the Ravens out. They're playing good football, and they're basically, for the most part, doing what we expect them to do.
Yeah, I agree. But at the same time, we've seen this before where the Ravens have a really good season, and then the kind of questions are like, all right, well, what happens in the playoffs? And then we see them kind of just choke and fall flat. And we've seen it time and time and time again, ever since Lamar has been in there. We haven't seen those quality wins in the playoffs. They haven't made a deep run. Again, these seasons, they always have good records. They're always winning, at least above 500, and we're still seeing the same results. So I don't know. I like, in the postseason, I still would give the Chiefs and the Bills and the Dolphins the upper hand. Even knowing that they've been performing the most, like, as a team, I would still be willing to give it to the others as of right now.
Interesting. I do think it's also important while we're here to talk about, like, the middling teams, right? So let me pull up the standings here, because in the AFC, right, if we're just looking at the wild card, right, the Bills would make it at 4-3, the Steelers would make it at 4-2, and the Browns would make it at 4-2 if the playoffs started today. And I think other than the Bills, those are not teams you would expect to be in the playoffs. But, I mean, in the West, the Raiders, the Chargers are both 4-loss teams. The Bengals are sitting at 3-3. The Texans and the Colts also aren't teams, and they both have 500 records or worse. The Jets are still close enough at 3-3, and maybe we expected them to be there with Aaron Rodgers, but I think a lot of us gave up on that week 1. So I think it's important to talk about these middling teams because those would be the next ones into the playoffs, right? It's important to bring up teams like the Steelers and the Browns that even if we don't know that they're as good as Kansas City, like maybe getting these wins is important. So I want to start with Pittsburgh and the Rams from this past week because I think the Rams being healthy meant that we thought more highly of them than maybe we should have. And honestly, the Steelers, much like the Ravens, are winning games even when we don't expect them to. They're consistently going out and showing up. They don't even need to be that dominant, but they're winning football games.
Yeah, I mean, I know that the loss to Kyron Williams does hurt the Rams, but I mean, we still talk about their talent. Obviously, their receiving room is got talent. So again, we've seen the Steelers defense step up, and we've been saying it. You've been saying it. Steelers defense, they're good, and I've been refusing to believe it. But, again, holding, it's not even about holding. It was just they made it rough for Cooper Kupp, right? And they just focused solely on him, made Nakua just do all of it, and they came out on top. And, I mean, the offense for the Steelers, they actually were, working together. It was interesting to see because we haven't really seen that offense be cohesive for, long. We've seen some flashes here and there. And not to say that they didn't make mistakes in this game, but I mean, we saw, I think, more flashes in this game.
And it seems to be for the Steelers, like holding onto the ball is such a big thing. I mean, even the teams at the top, right? We watched Kansas City have some struggle with turnovers. Buffalo obviously has had their issues. The Eagles have turned the ball over what feels like a billion times this season. Like, honestly, the Steelers could win games just because they're not turning it over, which is a crazy threshold to think that in a conference with the Chiefs, the difference in any given game could be I didn't turn the ball over. Super bizarre to me. Some other middling teams then, what may end up being a pretty important game come season's end was Cleveland beating the Colts. This game's super fascinating to me, although very hard to watch because those Colts uniforms are absolutely fucking atrocious, dude. I don't know how anybody watched that whole game and felt okay at the end. Like, I was nauseous. They were rough. But the Browns defense didn't play well in this game, and that's been their bread and butter all season long. But they turned the ball over. Myles Garrett is an insane human being. What did he force 2 turnovers, a couple of sacks? Like, he had a really big day. And then, like, even with a backup quarterback and not having Deshaun Watson, like, they still managed to have the offense and the scoring to get it done. Like, I think this is a super important game, knowing that middle tier of teams, like, is going to be really competitive to make the playoffs.
Yeah, and I mean, again, I didn't really watch this game, but going in, Colts were still 3-3, and the Browns were 3-2. So I mean, that was for division wise. I mean, that was a very, very big win. So yeah.
All right, moving to the NFC. I mentioned at the top end of this that we did watch Philly and San Francisco lose games, but there's still a weird divide for me in the NFC. I still think that the Eagles, the 49ers, and maybe Dallas are all on that top tier. And then it feels like there's a pretty big gap between them and everybody else. So to talk about, let's start with just talking about the Eagles and 49ers, if that's where we expect this to be, right? I think the 49ers struggles in the grand scheme of things are trusting Purdy to do it without having 700 weapons. The week that they lost McCaffrey, they lost Debo, and they weren't finding George Kittle. So it was pretty much just Purdy and Ayuk, and clearly that was a struggle. But I mean, we haven't seen their game tonight since we're recording this on Monday, but even still, you have to expect them to be favorites over the Vikings, just based on what we've seen all season long. The 49ers being healthy means that they're very clearly the best team in the NFC, at least in my eyes. The Eagles then seem like the offense clicks somewhat. The defense has its struggles, but still plays okay. And I don't know that I could confidently see them back in the Super Bowl if San Francisco's healthy.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think health is all that matters to the Niners. I mean, I think when they're clicking, man. I don't see the Eagles being in that same conversation right now, at least because we haven't seen them be that cohesive unit that we saw last year. So I definitely would still give the edge to the Niners in this case.
So that being said, I think the interesting part is to see how these teams could contend, right? So let's bring the Cowboys into the mix. Obviously, we watched San Francisco take care of Dallas early this season. We won't get the Eagles Cowboys for another couple of weeks and then the very end of the season. But we'll clearly have a sample size for that by the end of the year. I think the interesting part is, do we see it as being realistic that Dallas could overtake one of these teams and maybe be a quote unquote dark horse into the Super Bowl?
I think they could overtake maybe the Eagles. I think that they have the, talent. If they, we saw it week 1, man. If they could do that every single week, then I think 100% they could really put up a better fight against even the Niners. But I think they could beat the Eagles. Do I see that happening? No. I still 100% believe that Dallas is going to choke greatly, and it's going to be amazing to watch every year. It's beautiful. So.
I think that the Eagles are a better team than the Cowboys. I would find it very difficult to see that. I mean, like we said, any given Sunday, right? But I think that if you have to play the odds, right, I think the Eagles are better than the Cowboys in a head-to-head matchup, that it's hard for me to believe Dallas could overtake the Eagles. The interesting part for me is again, we talk about the 49ers' health, that how much different does that game look if the 49ers don't have Christian McCaffrey? If the 49ers don't have Deebo Samuel, is that something that Dallas is better than? I don't want to disparage Brock Purdy, right? I think he is good enough to be starting in the league. Don't get me wrong, but I also watched him struggle when he didn't have 4 weapons. That's how they lost to Cleveland. Granted, Cleveland's defense is really good all season long. Again, Myles Garrett's a fucking animal. But I realistically see it that if they don't have those weapons in San Francisco, that maybe the Cowboys are better than an injured San Francisco team. And I think that health then becomes super important. The next team that I think it's interesting though is the Lions. So I think the Lions have the potential on offense to be really explosive. The only 2 teams in the NFC that have outscored them are the 49ers and the Eagles. And then realistically, their defense is just as good, if not better, than the Eagles. They've let up more points, admittedly, but I think their defense competes. Do we see the Lions being able to make noise in the NFC?
No. I hate to say that. I like the Lions. I don't love them, but I like them. But no, I just no. The difference there in general, I mean, after seeing this past week against the Ravens, and Ravens are still a pretty good team, but they just got nothing going. I mean, I don't know. It's about these, I don't know. I don't think so, but who knows?
Well, so I think it gets really interesting after the Lions, though, right? Again, if we're looking at wild card teams, we'd have, if the playoffs started today, we'd have the Cowboys, we'd have the Seahawks, and we'd have the 3-3 Bucks. Is there anybody that we realistically see other than if Eagles and 49ers are the favorites here, right? We said maybe a way outside chance to Dallas. Their playoff history is obviously not good, but I think they're a tier above that we can confidently say no to Detroit. Is there anybody else who could come out of the NFC, or is this just a 3-team race?
I see it as a 3-team race.
It's so hard. It's so hard for me to say that it is a 3-team race, but I'm with you in the idea that on paper, none of these teams compete. I guess I'll be interested to see the Seahawks play the 49ers this year. That maybe they can do some damage. It is a divisional opponent. But even still, if I had to pick them straight up, I think the 49ers are significantly better, even not healthy. I'm with you on the Lions that I don't think they get there. The Cowboys have to show me something in the playoffs before I can believe in them. It's so weird to me that I'm down on the Eagles and Niners after the past 2 weeks, and still I can't say that anybody gets through them. It's really hard for me to buy into my own beliefs.
Yeah, no, I agree. That is, yeah.
Kind of feels like shit. Really don't like it. All right. So, all that being said, like I said, we just had some big picture stuff, maybe talking about some middling teams. I think it's time we break into fantasy. Hell week is over because 6 teams being on a bye in the same week really fucking hurts, and I wish the NFL would stop. But everybody's back this week. So, what do you see? Who do you like? What's got your eye on the waiver wire? Maybe what's going on in the fantasy world?
Oh, I don't even know, to be honest. Like, again, I barely looked at my team, but I will say, again, we saw, I think it was Royce Freeman. He had a pretty decent game. I think he's going to be more involved. Again, that injury to Kyron Williams is, he's on the IR, so he's out at least 4 weeks. I'd be picking up some backups here, especially for these bigger teams that, have the offensive power, that maybe they won't focus so much on the running backs or other, lesser names, but still get featured. So that's what I'd be looking for.
I think the other one for me that becomes really interesting is Kareem Hunt. With the Browns this week, we saw a really different form of their offense, where without Deshaun Watson, they used a backup quarterback. Like, I think they're going to rely on this run game, and we actually saw Kareem Hunt have a pretty good day. If the Browns are relying on their defense to be the better team in football games, I know Kareem Hunt was available in a lot of leagues, so maybe it helps to go pick him up if you get the opportunity. I know a lot of running backs are in and out of the lineup, like maybe even a Christian McCaffrey substitute while he works himself back to health. Like, I think Kareem Hunt's a really good option, and forever he's been good out of the backfield. So, if you're in a PPR league, you might even get some catches from him too.
Yeah, agreed.
All right. I think that brings us into gambling. I just kind of want to flex that even though we didn't record a podcast last week, I'm still like 8-4 this week. I'm doing pretty good. I'm not going to count them towards my record because I didn't count my losses either, but just want a little subtle flex. In week 6, Noah went 8-7. I went 7-8. It brings both of our records this season for 41, 35, and 1. Let's get it started. All 16 teams this week, or all 16 games this week. Let's start off with Thursday, Tampa Bay, Buffalo. Bills are 7.5 favorites.
Oh, God. 7.5 feels really big recently. I feel like, I don't know.
Yeah, this one's...
I'm a Bills fan. I got to go with it. I got to go Buffalo.
Emotionally, I want to take the Bucks, right? The Bucks are coming off a divisional loss. The Bills, I don't know what they did against the Patriots, but I think we've seen Buffalo bounce back when they lose over the past couple of seasons. 7.5 doesn't feel unmanageable. I'm also taking Buffalo. I got the Eagles and the Commanders. Eagles are 6.5 favorites on the road. I hate gambling on my own team. I really do. This game went to overtime the first time, but I feel like Philly's passing offense is clicking a little more. I'm going to take the Eagles, but I really, really don't feel good about it.
Yeah, no, they put up a good game against the Dolphins. I'll go Eagles here too.
All right, I got Jacksonville and Pittsburgh. The Jags are 1.5 favorites on the road.
I'll take the Jags on that one, yeah.
I'm taking Pittsburgh, man. They're managing to find a way. Their defense has been pretty solid. Man, if TJ Watt stays involved, I really think this is a game they can win at home. I got New Orleans, Indianapolis. Colts are 1.5 favorites at home. I think I'm taking Indy personally. I watched Jonathan Taylor be involved. New Orleans just doesn't look like they're doing things well consistently. And even the Colts putting up 38 against the Browns really just gives me a lot of faith that their offense is doing something in the right direction, unlike the past few weeks. So I'm going to ride that and take Indy.
I'll fade you. I'll go Saints just because.
All right. I've got Houston, Carolina. Texans are 3-point favorites on the road.
Yeah, I don't expect the Panthers to be picking up this win. I think CJ Stroud coming off that bye is going to be good, so I'm going Texans.
Yeah, Houston's feels like they've got it together for the first time in a long time. Carolina just doesn't wow me. I think a 3-point is easy enough to cover. I've got Rams and Dallas. Dallas is 6.5 favorites at home. Man, I don't know what to do with this. 6.5 is such a good line that it could really go either way. I think Dallas is going to win the game outright, and I have no idea what to do with that spread, so I'm just going to take Dallas and cross my fingers.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm going to go Rams here.
All right, I've got Atlanta and Tennessee. The Falcons are 1.5 favorites on the road.
I'm taking Titans here.
I'll fade you and go with Atlanta. They're okay, but I really don't think either of these teams are very good. I think this is going to be pretty boring. All right, I've got Jets and Giants, the weird double home game. The Jets are the favorites, technically the away team.
I'll go Jets. Oh God, that hurt to say. But yeah, I'll take the Jets. Oh gosh.
You know what? I'm going to take the Giants solely because I expect Tyrod Taylor to play again. They'll give Daniel Jones another week. Tyrod Taylor put up a pretty good game, and Daniel Jones looked like a fucking scrub. So I'll take the Giants. We'll make that one interesting. I've got Patriots, Dolphins. Dolphins are 10-point favorites at home.
Oh God, I don't even know. Yeah, I think Mac Jones having a decent week this week is a rarity. So I expect him to fall back down. And Dolphins, yeah.
I'm with you. I think the Dolphins' offense is far too explosive for New England, too. Like, 10 points should realistically be an easy cover, and I never say that for double-digit spreads. I've got Minnesota and Green Bay. The Packers are 1.5 favorites at home.
I mean, yeah, I think I'm going Packers here, especially with no Justin Jefferson. Yeah.
I just have no faith in Jordan Love. I don't know what I'm doing there. Like, it's not like he's been bad this year. I don't mean to disparage the guy, but like, I just do not trust him to win football games. Minnesota and 1.5 feels like the better take for me. I've got the Browns and the Seahawks. Seattle is a 3-point favorite at home. Man, Cleveland's defense has been good. Seattle hasn't wowed me. All the faith in the world in Myles Garrett. I'm taking Cleveland. I hate taking the Browns, but I'm taking the Browns.
I guess I gotta no. I'll go Seahawks here at home. Hoping.
All right, I got Cincy and San Francisco. Niners are 6-point favorites.
Yeah, I think I'm taking Niners on that.
6 points does not feel like enough. I'm also taking the Niners. I have Baltimore and Arizona. Baltimore, the Ravens are 8.5 favorites on the road. Man, I the only reason I don't know is because Arizona seems to be losing every game by like 6 points. Like, they're in all of them. I said it earlier. I guess I'm going to stick with it. I'm going to take Baltimore to cover. They just feel like the only team getting it done when they're supposed to.
I mean, I want to take the Ravens, but we always see these like good weeks followed by mediocre weeks. So I don't know. I think that spread's just too big. I got to go Cardinals.
I like it. Kansas City and Denver. Chiefs are 7.5 favorites.
Yeah, the Chiefs.
I'm also taking the Chiefs. I have like a tiny little seed of a doubt only because it's 7.5. Like, if this were 7 flat, I'd take Kansas City. I wouldn't think about it. For 7.5 is like a touchdown, and then for some reason it just feels super wrong, and I don't want to do it. But I'm taking Kansas City. I have the Bears and the Chargers. Chargers are 8.5 favorites at home. I'm taking the Chargers. I think they're the better team to begin with. And then also not knowing what Justin Fields is doing, like, I think makes it kind of tough. Like, I know they played well this past week, but they beat the Raiders. So I don't know how much faith to put in that. I'll take the Chargers. I know the spread is bigger than it probably should be, but I can feel okay about LA.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like, I don't know. The Chargers didn't do that well against the Chiefs here yesterday. and the Bears put up points, I gotta stick. I'll go Chargers as well.
All right. And then Monday night's game, the Raiders and the Lions. Lions are 7.5 favorites at home.
Yeah, Lions.
I'm with you. I don't expect Detroit to struggle 2 weeks in a row. And I think the Raiders are not nearly good enough to compete. So Detroit easy. Unless you got anything else, I think that wraps us up this week. Except to say that the lines are provided by FanDuel as of Monday and are subject to change by game time. Gamble responsibly. 1-800-GAMBLER, all that stuff. I'm not dead. Fuck my rant. If you don't have anything else, I think that wraps us up. Moving forward, we may different days of the week just for some scheduling issues, so be on the lookout for whenever these drop. If we record early, I'm still going to try and post on Wednesdays, but I don't know. Who knows what I'm going to do? My mind is an enigma. Anyway, thank you guys for watching. We will see you here next week.